Bloodborne is a game that revels in fucking with its players. From early game surprises like bosses changing form, all the way to the big crazy reveal at your adventure's halfway point, Bloodborne takes every chance it can to subvert some of your expectations as a player to make you uncomfortable, put you on edge, and generally just kinda dick with you as much as it can. When it comes to the game's bosses though, they're pretty surface level. There are only a few bosses in Bloodborne that surprised me with their mechanics the first time I fought them. Father Gascoine, Rom the Vacuous Spider, Micolash, Host of the Nightmare, and the Witch of Hemwick. The rest of the bosses are pretty much what you see is what you get. That's not to say they aren't fun, intense fights, or that they weren't very often freaky as hell, because they were definitely all of that. They just didn't do anything beyond the standard fare of enter room, fight boss, have a few panic attacks. But the four that I mentioned, they all do something a little different to switch things up and surprise the player. Gascoine changes form halfway through the fight, getting entirely new moves and turning more aggressive. Rom's fight is set in a unique dreamscape and you're surrounded by hundreds of spiders. Micolash is less of a fight and more of a chase as he runs around a maze until you corner him in a small room and get some damage in. But the Witch? Oh, she does something entirely her own. The Witch of Hemwick's fight has first-time hunters constantly on edge as it plays clever tricks on the player that makes them question what they just saw. From the moment you step into the room for this fight, it's clear that something's different about it. The Witch's health bar shows up, but attacking the only enemy in the room doesn't actually do anything to the health bar. You'll end up wondering, okay, so if I hit this thing, where the hell is she? Where's the fucking boss? And that's the hook. That's the thing that gets you immediately involved and uncomfortable and off-put in this fight. See, the Witch is invisible unless you're standing close to her. So now you're running around this big room looking for something to fight, but you can't find anything that actually gives you some progress. And then another enemy shows up. If you happen to be looking in the right direction, you'll see a red glow thing moving around before the next baddie appears. And this does two things. One, it lets you know where something, probably the Witch, is. So you can follow your impulse and run to attack that red glow. This keeps the player from being at a loss. It makes sure that you know something is there and it keeps things moving forward. And two, it further weirds the player out. At this point in the game, you haven't seen a red glow like that before. It's something new in a boss fight that's already messing with you. So backing up a bit, you remember this guy? He's called a Mad One. And during the fight, the Witch summons more of these. The most I've seen at once is 3, but when you take one down, another takes its place shortly after. The best strategy in this fight is to honestly avoid them and focus on the Witch, since trying to take out the Mad Ones is just gonna spend time and resources without actually giving you any progress. They're already a source of extra pressure on the player, but the longer you take, the more pressure they're gonna be throwing your way. So they just keep showing up and showing up until you kind of realize that, you know what, this isn't going anywhere, I need to ignore them. But they're still chasing you. It's fucking great. I love it. And you know, that in and of itself wouldn't be so bad if there were just one Witch. But, about halfway through the first Witch's health bar, a second Witch is gonna spawn, but here's the kicker, her health doesn't show up until there's only about a third of the first Witch's health bar left. When you notice this new Witch, which is to say when you find it and attack thinking it's the first one, and the health bar doesn't go down, that kinda catches your attention, you know? Even after having fought her a few times, this is still something that throws me off because I'm so used to the fact that boss gets hit, health go down. And Bloodborne is such an intense game that anytime something's even slightly off, it's immediately noticed and it sends a shock to the system. It puts the player measurably off balance, even if it's just for a little bit. Playing with something so simple that's also everywhere, like they do in this fight, something so innately known as fact by its players, Bloodborne bends the fourth wall. It doesn't break it, it just bends it, and it messes with the player in a way that goes beyond the screen and the controller. For a moment, the player is doubting their eyes. They lose trust in what they're seeing and what they're being told by the game, in just the way that the player's character kind of does throughout the entire game. This is all pretty crazy and intense, right? 5 enemies at most given moments throughout the fight, 2 of which are invisible? It's bananas! It's not a fair fight! Well, slow your roll, anger guy. Let me explain something. The witches, while they can grab you for a pretty painful sneak attack, mainly just disable you so that you're left open for the mad ones. The witches aren't these unfair, fast-moving and attacking bags of rudeness that go after you every chance they get. No, in fact, they're more defensive and passive during the fight, spending most of their time calling for help and running away from the player. That said, when they do start playing crowd control against you, it's an immediate curveball that's gonna throw you off. There's only one other enemy in the game that can hold you in a place like these do with that weird grabby spell, and you've only seen it once by this point, and it ended up sucking a big chunk of your inside out when it grabbed you. So you have this understanding that something pretty bad's probably about to happen. It's like a panic button for the player, and even if they don't get hit by the 3 mad ones that are after their butt, they're certainly gonna be tossed into that panic, and they're definitely gonna make a mistake. Now, throughout Bloodborne, the player's constantly made to think about and question their sanity. As you gain insight points, you start to see things that weren't there before. Enemies gain new attacks and their models change slightly. In addition, the fight against Micolash puts you against a literal madman with a fucking cage on his head that screams about elder gods and shit. Not to mention the straight out of cosmic horror weird shit that you've come across in the later half of the game, and the fact that it's a cosmic horror adventure that had everyone thinking it was traditional gothic horror with just werewolves and vampires and shit. Then, halfway through the game, you start seeing these ugly Cthulhu bastards everywhere. See, one of the themes in cosmic horror as a genre is knowledge leading to madness, and in no other boss fight in Bloodborne does this core idea shine through than in the fight against the Witch of Hemwick. The fight against the witch embodies the core of Bloodborne's desire to instill self-doubt into the player and their character, a disbelief at what's going on, and a consideration that the impossible to understand should stay misunderstood. It's all condensed into one small, intense combat encounter. It personifies the best of Bloodborne, despite how it's not as challenging as some of the other fights once you really understand how it works. And that, in my opinion, is what makes the Witch of Hemwick's fight one of the best fights in all of Bloodborne. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about the Witch of Hemwick fight and the overall themes that Bloodborne has of cosmic horror and how it manages to tie into that. If you enjoyed this, please do the YouTube stuff. Leave a like, subscribe, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'll see you next time. Bye!